Hey guys, welcome to the Week 8 edition of the Fantasy Points UFL Breakdown. I'm here with Millionaire Maker winner and one of the winningest spring football DFS players of all time, Neil Orfield. Neil, how you doing?
Yeah, as we were discussing earlier, I am quite tired today. Don't want to make excuses, but like if I am forgetful, if I just like misspeak, you got to forgive me because I got a new dog and he's really young and he just wakes me up every morning and has a ton of energy. And so I'm sleeping like 4 hours a night right now. It's fun having a new dog in the house, but I'm pretty tired. Excited to get to week 8. Excited to erase week 7 from my memory.
Oh man, yeah, week 7 was something, but yeah, Neil, despite your tiredness, we will persevere. For those of you who are looking to get access to any of our UFL or NFL products as we enter the end of the UFL season and really the beginning of best ball season, training camp, preseason, and then, of course, the NFL season, you can access our UFL package this year with a Fantasy Pro or a Fantasy Bundle subscription. Promo code UFL 2026 saves you 10%. Of course, you'll get the last few weeks of UFL. That includes our player projections, our ownership projections, my article, which this week is behind the paywall, our access to our paywall Discord, where I'll post any relevant props. Prop selection has been very iffy this year, not very deep across the board, but there's still some good stuff. You get access to all that, but then you also get access, Neil, to our fantastic NFL products here with the Fantasy Bundle subscription. You can get the Data Suite, Fantasy Pro. You can get Scott Barrett's DFS articles, Ryan Heath's advanced matchups, all that great stuff. Definitely worth checking out over at fantasypoints.com. See what bundles right for you. And again, promo code UFL 2026 saves you 10%. Neil, before we get into these games, I did want to talk very briefly about the current playoff situation because I do think it's pretty interesting. Shout out to United Football Fans TV for posting this very helpful graphic that we have on your screen right now. There's a very clear-cut three tiers to the UFL right now. St. Louis, Orlando, and DC are all 5-2. All three of those teams could clinch a playoff berth this week with a win against their respective opponents. Birmingham, Louisville, Dallas, they're all 3-4. Neither of them can be eliminated or clinch in week 8, but obviously they all have the inside track at that fourth playoff spot. Again, no divisions this year. So it is just the top 4 teams. And then Columbus and Houston at the bottom of the league. Columbus is eliminated with a loss and a DC win, or they are eliminated with a loss and a Dallas win. Houston is eliminated with a loss and a Louisville win, or they are eliminated with a loss and a Dallas win. So shout out United Football Fans TV at UFTV1 for posting that helpful graphic over on Twitter. Neil, any comments on the playoff race before we get into these games?
Yeah, it's pretty wild how close it is. I mean, I think it's pretty unlikely that Columbus or Houston make it at this point. I think a week after I had suggested Columbus as a pretty good buy, they lost. Now it's like they're long shot at this point. I still think of them as one of the better teams, and they're 2-5.
Right.
So that is pretty shocking. Have to imagine the top 3 teams are in, and I don't have a great read on the next one in out of Birmingham, Louisville, Dallas. I feel like it's pretty big toss up. I'd have to look at the schedule. Honestly, I have not looked at like what are the matchups for the next 3 games because I think that's going to be pretty impactful on who has the best odds of making it.
Yeah, so right now, just according to the DraftKings betting odds for those 3 teams that you just mentioned, Birmingham Stallions are plus 1,000, Louisville Kings plus 1,500, Dallas Renegades plus 2,000. I personally like Birmingham the most out of those 3 teams, but I'm pulling up the schedule here, Neil. I'm not sure if you have an opinion on those odds if you were trying to sneak a championship future bet in on one of those ancillary teams.
I think I'd probably take Louisville of those 3. Okay. Just Birmingham, I mean, DTR obviously has been pretty good, but he hasn't been like amazing. Louisville, I think, like has a really strong defense, and I think Chandler Rogers is like pretty good as a game manager. I think the offense has gotten a little bit better in recent weeks. So yeah, I think with Louisville, I think has the best defense of those 3, and I think Birmingham has the worst defense of those 3. So give me the team with the the best defense and the ascending offense, I think.
Yeah, for what it's worth, just looking at weeks 9 and 10, it does look like Birmingham has the softest schedule here. They get Columbus and then Houston in weeks 9 and 10. They also draw Columbus this week. Dallas a little bit tougher. They get Houston and then the St. Louis Battlehawks to end the year. Louisville gets Dallas and then Columbus in those final 2 weeks. So I think that's interesting. Like that this is like that things have gotten a little bit more competitive than they were looking in the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season. But Neil, let's get into these games here. Slate kicks off Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern with the Orlando Storm at the Dallas Renegades. The Storm are 2.5-point underdogs. The total here is 45.5. I don't have a strong take on the total or spread here, Neil. I think I would probably take the Storm with the points, with the 2.5. What do you think?
Give me the Storm. I think you call it the money line. I think the Storm are going to win this game outright. I just think Dallas is not that good of a team. I just don't think that Austin Reed has really shown us anything since early on in the season. Seemed a little bit fluky to me at the time. I think I'd just take the Storm here straight up.
Yeah, no, I think that is reasonable. Speaking of the Storm, Neil, Jack Plummer, I was a little surprised sort of this initial ownership number at, right around 17, 18%, among the highest owned QBs in my first run of ownership projections. What do you think of Plummer this week? Because, he's a guy where it's just very straightforward. You're not getting much as a rusher. You're generally double stacking him. The offense has been, I would say, pretty good overall with him at the helm. What are you thinking of Plummer? Because that ownership number was just a little bit high in my mind when I ran things earlier today.
It is a bit high. I still think I'm in. Like, I think at this point, I'm willing to cut out some quarterbacks, including Austin Reed. So I think I'm probably cutting Austin Reed out of my player pool. Just with the Luke Lennon coming in, Reed has just been so bad for. This is going to be the week that he bites me. Of course, it's just the way it goes with UFL DFS. Yeah, I think at this point I'm ready to just cut my losses. I played him in the best matchups. He hasn't gotten it done. I think I'm ready to cut out Austin Reed, which means that I'll be maybe with the field on Jack Plummer. Like, he's just been, at this point, we have a large enough sample size to say, like, he's a decent UFL quarterback. He has a strong offense around him. And it's fairly easy to stack him. I saw your note on Chris Rowland. I had no idea that Chris Rowland was so limited last week in terms of playing time. That makes it interesting to me. But we at the very least have, Hamler, Badger. I think we can still play some Rowland. I think I'll be, I doubt I get over 20%, but we've got him a little bit under 20%. I think I'm probably okay with that with Jack Plummer.
Yeah, so I think part of the reason you see Plummer get pulled up a bit in ownership projections, even if his raw projection isn't particularly impressive, is because it's such an easy stack with guys like Badger, guys like Hamler. And then, of course, Chris Rowland only ran 10 routes on, I believe, 28 dropbacks last week. And this was something where I made a point to ask Anthony Becht about this in Orlando's midweek media availability. I basically said, what was with the reduction in Rowland's playing time? Only 10 routes on, like I said, 27, 28 dropbacks. And Anthony Becht said, I don't know if it was necessarily playing time. He's had a lot of output for us this season. He had 160 return yards. It's hard to come out on first down after running 60 or 70 yards. He's maybe missing a first snap. Then he comes in. We have certain packages. At a certain point, his targets, he needs to have a minimum of 5. If we had gotten more plays in that game, it wouldn't have been a problem. I do not expect that to be a problem this week. To me, I kind of felt like that was a slight cop-out answer where, I think in reality, their personnel groupings and Rowland just being out on the field kind of got a little bit away from them, because we see guys like, for Houston, for instance, Jalan Moreno-Cropper, he's out there returning kicks and he's out there for 90% of routes. It's not a problem. I do take Becht at his word. He's generally been a very honest coach, and my own personal coach speak index, he would be one of the more reliable in terms of coach speak. So I'm not particularly worried about Rowland's workload, and I do think they'll make it a clear point to get him on the field. But yeah, it was very shocking to look at last week's numbers and see Rowland at, I think, a 37% route share and Sam Wigla's at like 65%. That's something that Orlando just can't afford. Rowland's a better player, and obviously they're fighting for seeding here. So did want to get that out of the way. But yeah, all 3 of those wide receivers are solid options. Obviously no showdown here. So we probably don't need to discuss anybody outside of the backfield. And Neil, unfortunately, the one backfield that we could rely on, the one backfield that we thought, okay, we have consistent usage. Corbin hasn't had these huge games, but at least he's getting 65, 70% of backfield weighted opportunity. Well, Neil, I think those days have unfortunately come to an end. We saw 3 running backs active for the first time all season for Orlando In week 7, Elijah Dotson led the way with 39% of backfield weighted opportunity. He finished with 34% of snaps. Jashaun Corbin was at 43% of snaps, 36% of backfield weighted opportunity. And then Trey Stewart rounded it out at 26% of snaps, 25% of weighted opportunity. This was another thing that I was planning on asking Anthony Becht about, but he actually got a question sort of just about the run game more generally. And he did say, on the running backs, maybe we'll mix it up this week and try a different combination of guys. That's concerning. In my article, I speculated maybe there's the possibility Corbin could be inactive and then they roll with Dotson and Trey Stewart in week 8 just to sort of see how that combination works. I'm not exactly sure what they're going to do here. My take was that if they keep 3 active, I'm probably not touching this backfield. Maybe you could sell me on one of the cheaper guys. But if they keep 2 active, particularly if it's like Dotson and Trey Stewart, I think we'll get some pretty good prop opportunities on like anytime touchdown scores for those guys. But they'll also be pretty strong DFS values, Neil. What do you think here?
When you say we could rely on Jashaun Corbin, do you mean we could rely on him to lose us money every single week? Because I mean, he's had the opportunity, has not done anything.
We could rely on consistent usage and disappointing DFS scores. Yeah, is what we could rely on.
He would trick us into play. I think I've gotten him wrong for every game for 2 straight seasons. Going back to last year when he was crushing, I was like, why is this guy getting so much ownership? Like, he's not that good.
Right.
And he'd run for 2 touchdowns. He's been very frustrating. I would love it if Jashaun Corbin is inactive. I think regardless of who is active, I mean, obviously this would require that Dotson be active, but I like Dotson the best. I think Dotson is, we came into the year like we have 2 stud running backs, and it kind of seems like, the way they're using him, like Becht still believes that Dotson is a stud. And at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if he just surpasses Corbin, throw in the quote that you just mentioned. I could see Dotson taking on a heavy workload here, and he has been fairly good in limited opportunities, and obviously much cheaper. So yeah, I think Dotson would be the one that I am the most interested in playing on the full slate. Obviously, like you said, we're gonna have to wait and see who is actually active. But yeah, if Corbin's not in there, I'm gonna absolutely love Dotson. I think even if Corbin is active, I'm just going to try to get ahead of it and be make the assumption that Dotson maybe takes on a bigger workload and play some of him on the main slate this week.
Okay. Yeah, I like that take. For what it's worth, Jashaun Corbin, the lowest PFF grade of the trio of Orlando running backs, only 3.5 yards per carry this season. No one's been particularly great for Orlando, but even Corbin hasn't really stood out. So it'll be interesting to see what they end up doing there. We record on Thursday, but we should get word on these inactives either this evening or tomorrow, of course, before lock. All right, Neil, moving it over to the Dallas side of this game. I already got your opinion on Austin Reed. Doesn't look like you're going to play him. I did want to note, at least regarding Austin Reed, that Luke Lennon played 13 snaps. He had 1 pass attempt. He had 6 rushes in a change of pace role. That's concerning, and I do sort of think that usage is going to probably bring down Austin Reed's ownership. I have him projected at 14% right now. He might be a guy that I sort of manually adjust lower. We'll see how industry projections unfold over the next 24 or so hours. Neil, are you still going to be playing guys like Tyler Vaughns? Deontay Burnett was placed on IR for what it's worth. So probably get, Vaughns' role will stay roughly the same, but we should get more routes on the outside for guys like Emmanuel, Butler, Denzel Mims. Where are you at on these Dallas wide receivers?
Yeah, I'll certainly still have some Vaughns at the very least. Okay. 9,200. We have a fair amount of ownership going there. I suspect I'll come in underweight on Vaughns, but he's obviously a strong bring back on Orlando build, strong one-off. So I'll definitely have some Vaughns still. And yeah, I guess maybe I'll get to a little bit of who is it coming in for Deontay Burnett?
Emmanuel Butler.
Butler, I think is probably playable. I doubt I get to Mims. I think I can get to a little bit of Butler. I'm probably not going to get to Mims.
Yeah, Mims sucks. I don't want to play Mims. Emmanuel Butler's better than him, just outright. And I noted in my article there was one instance early in the season where Mims was active ahead of Butler, but then there have been 3 instances later in the year where Butler was active ahead of Mims. So the team clearly prefers Butler, and just from like a targets per route run perspective, really any advanced stat, Butler's been better. Mims has not looked good on film or statistically. I also think, a guy like Drake Stoops, still very in play at 4,300. Greg Ward, a little expensive for his role, but with no Deontay Burnett, those guys could be live for an extra target potentially. So they're fine. Probably more in play if you're a bit more excited about Austin Reed, which for what it's worth, I am planning on playing some Austin Reed this week, in part because the spread's close, in part because Dallas throws so much that even, Reed losing 5 to 10 snaps to Luke Lennon isn't the end of the world, because he could still push for 35 or 40 dropbacks. And we've seen good games from him in the past. It's just lately, man, he has looked very bad. When it comes to this running back room, Day Hunter, like I said, we don't have, or I don't know if I mentioned this, but we do not have a Wednesday injury report yet. But on the Tuesday injury report, Day Hunter was listed as a DNP on both Monday and Tuesday. So he is likely out this week. And that makes the backfield pretty clean to me. Ellis Merriweather and Lorenzo Lingard should be our backs here. The last time Merriweather was active without Day Hunter, he finished the game with 28.5 weighted opportunities. That was the 5th best workload in modern spring football history. Obviously, I'm not anticipating something that extreme, but Neil, they clearly like Merriweather here. He's priced up at $8K, but I think if you're paying up for running back, he's arguably the only guy you can have a decent amount of confidence will earn 60, 65%, maybe even a little more of his backfield's weighted opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough matchup. Orlando only giving up 3.7 yards per carry over the past 4 games. But Merriweather's just been so good at getting usage, and he's been pretty good with his usage. I've kept on going back to Day Hunter, has not been working out. But I think Merriweather has actually been fairly solid with his usage. He'll get some targets. So yeah, I think he's a very strong play.
Yep. Yeah, like that. I don't think I will be getting to any Lorenzo Lingard. I think if this was like the last game in the slate, he would maybe be interesting as a late swap, but for a Friday game, probably not. All right, moving it on to the DC Defenders at the Louisville Kings. DC favored by 6 here. Total is 45.5 over on DraftKings Sportsbook. Neil, I think I like DC -6. Don't really have a strong opinion on the total. What do you think?
Yeah. Give me the over. I think give me the over.
Oh,
okay. I think Chandler Rogers has been good enough, and Teamu's just been dominant. So yeah, I'd say give me the over here.
All right. Speaking of Teamu's dominance, he should be one of the highest owned quarterbacks on the slate yet again. And I mean, it's no surprise he's averaged 24.6 DraftKings fantasy points per game over the last month. Louisville's also been, fairly vulnerable pass defense over the last month. They've allowed the most passing yards per game over that time frame. Neil, I'm assuming, I know you said you're going to be wholesale cutting out some quarterbacks. I imagine you're going to be leaving in Jordan Ta'amu.
I will be leaving in Jordan Ta'amu. Yeah, last week, I mean, we saw, Jordan Ta'amu is the one quarterback that you have to worry. Last week, I faded him. I had 3 shares of Jordan Ta'amu last week, and we're 9 minutes left in the second quarter, and it's 3rd and 15, and I'm thinking I might actually get out of this alive. And I kind of had this sinking feeling of like, but this is Jordan Ta'amu. He's going to throw a touchdown here, 3rd and 15. Threw an 81-yard touchdown, 3rd and 15. I don't know how a defense allows that. Somehow, Jordan Ta'amu just keeps doing it. So I think does. Jordan Ta'amu. You just kind of have to play some shares of Jordan Ta'amu. I don't know exactly how much I'll get there, but I'll certainly have more than the 3 shares I had last week. Same matchup as last week, in which he excelled. Ta'amu is just on kind of his own level right now. He looks like the best quarterback in the UFL to me. So I will certainly have some shares of Ta'amu.
Yeah, like that. And, I think Neil's stacking him very straightforward. Cornell Powell is going to be your best option there. He's priced up at 7,700, still projecting for massive ownership at 41%, just kind of overall the best player there. Ty Scott, also another very, very strong option on the outside. And then Eric Ezukanma is a guy that I wrote up because his usage, even since Keke has returned, has been very encouraging. Ezukanma has run more routes than Cutie in back-to-back weeks. Ezukanma also hit a season-high 81% route share in week 7. Again, this isn't a slot role that's worth a ton in this offense. Only about 3.5 touches per game for Ezukanma over the last 2 weeks, but this is a pretty weak week overall for just value across the board, and particularly at wide receiver, not a great week for value. So you're going to see a guy like Jalan Moreno-Cropper draw significantly more ownership. And, Neil, I sort of wrote this up as like, look, Ezukanma's an interesting pivot off a guy like Moreno-Cropper. I think also the same could be said for Drake Stoops, where, both of those guys are probably going to be in the 5 to 10% range for ownership. Jalan Moreno-Cropper going to be much more popular than that. Anything to add on DC pass catchers, Neil?
No, I'm with you. I think Scott, Powell, Ezukanma, probably not going anywhere else. And we didn't even see the tight end really. Mason Fairchild last week as the last man standing, didn't really do much. So it's probably just those three.
And for what it's worth, we do not have Briley Moore listed on the injury report. He dealt with a personal issue last week. Shannon Harris said he just had something he had to take care of with his family. So he's likely back. I have him projected in right now. And then Braylon Sanders has been dealing with that toe issue. That kept him out last week. He was listed as limited on Tuesday. So we'll need to keep an eye on him. That would take, some routes away from Ty Scott, would also take Javon Antonio from active with Braylon Sanders out to inactive if Braylon Sanders ends up playing. So really just a note for the 2-game slate. Neil, this DC backfield, I always feel a little bit nauseous when we talk about them, given that they, I feel like they really let us on early in the season. Deon Jackson as like this uber bell cow hasn't quite worked out that way, but week 7 offered sort of another, you could argue, glimmer of hope that Deon Jackson's usage might end up being good in some of these games. He did finish with 69% of backfield weighted opportunities, 9 rush attempts, 3 targets. Abram Smith and Xavion Valladay both finished with 2 rush attempts and 1 target each. 51% of snaps for Deon Jackson. So, he led the backfield in all the metrics we want to see. He's still pretty expensive. I'm curious what you want to do with Deon Jackson. I was looking at him as more of a 2-game slate play, but I do think he's interesting for Maine if you really want to go that direction.
Yeah, I mean, it is the same matchup. So, if there's something they liked that they saw in the matchup, I guess you could think maybe they'll go back to him here. 3% projected ownership is enticing. I still think he's mostly like a late swap option if you have, one dud in the first game and you have to make up some ground, but you're still kind of in it. I think Deon Jackson could work there. It is promising to see the weighted opportunity. You see the other two at the very bottom last week with Deon Jackson listed fourth there. So I think he's playable. I probably will have a share or two, I would guess. But I think he's more of a late swap option, not somebody that I'm going in planning on having like 20% plus.
Yeah, and I think whether you're playing the 2-game slate or the main slate, right now I don't even have Alice Merriweather projected for significant ownership. I think only around 20%. So paying up for running back is sort of an interesting way to just get your build a lot different than the field. Like playing a guy like Deon Jackson and then filling it in with largely chalk is going to be a pretty good tournament lineup, I think. So I might have a team or two that goes that direction on Maine, but I think he's much more interesting for the 2-gamer. Don't really think there's anyone else worth talking about here. I mean, if you're playing the 2-gamer, I think a guy like Briley Moore is always viable, but that would be about it. Let's talk, Neil, the Louisville Kings. Chandler Rogers, this is I wouldn't say a great matchup from, when you look at season-long statistics, but lately DC's been a little bit more vulnerable against the pass, 6.5 yards per attempt allowed. That's the 4th most over the last 4 weeks. And I think even more importantly, Neil, Louisville's going to be a big dog here. DC's offense is firing on all cylinders. That should push Rogers towards high end, top 2, maybe top 1 passing volume among all the quarterbacks in the league this week. He's also only 8,800. We're not worried about him getting benched. So he certainly does have stuff going for him, even though the projection isn't necessarily eye-popping. I only have him for around 13 DK points right now. What do you think?
Yeah, I'll have some. He's going to make my pool. Again, it'll probably be 3 shares or so. I'm not taking any big. I currently don't think I'll have any huge stands at quarterback this week, like I did last week with 16 shares from one game and spread out everywhere else. But so I'll be able to on the players that I'm not jamming, I can get up to 3-4 shares. My guess I'll have 3 shares of Chandler Rogers. I think that he's a strong enough play. Runs a little bit. I think he's shown a little bit of competence at least. I don't know that I want to say upside exactly because he's not really throwing down the field a ton, but like,
right.
On a slate, if we don't get some quarterback popping off, I think he could get to the 24. I think it's like within his range of outcomes, and that could be what you need from an $8,800 quarterback. So I like Chandler Rogers a bit. He's not like my favorite quarterback on the slate.
Yeah, no, I think that is reasonable. And, if you're playing Rodgers, or even if you're not, I think the main guy that people are going to be looking at on Louisville as a pass catcher is going to be Tariq Black. He leads Louisville in target share, receiving fantasy points per game, and first downs per route run over the last month, priced as just the wide receiver 16. He's obviously the best value there. Neil, we know that they're sort of going to round this 3 wide receiver formation out with Lucky Jackson and Isaiah Winstead. Do you have much interest in either of those guys? Because I think that makes playing either of them with Tariq Black makes for a lot more of an interesting tournament lineup with Chandler Rogers than just going with Tariq Black, which I think will kind of be what the field defaults to.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that they are at the very least strong within stacks.
Right.
I might get to like Lucky Jackson. I keep going back trying to make Lucky Jackson happen. It hasn't been working, but he's, single digit ownership for a very talented receiver.
Yeah.
And maybe takes a little time to get on the same page as your quarterback as he's coming in. So one of these weeks, you got to think Lucky Jackson's going to get that magic back. So I would guess I have certainly more than the 8% he's projected for. I don't know if I get above like 20%, but I wouldn't be surprised if I get close there. And then Isaiah Winstead, 7 targets last week. We've seen games before where Winstead has really gone off. Now he's down at, 7,200, just 2% ownership. I'll definitely be over that number as well. So I actually think this is like a fairly strong offense to attack. And like you said, like they're going to be pushed, or they're probably going to be pushed by DC. So they're going to, they're kind of fairly priced and not getting a ton of ownership. I like this passing game a bit.
Yeah, no, I think that's reasonable. I really like the idea of being overweight, at least a bit, on both Lucky Jackson. We have him projected at 8%, and Winstead, you noted his 2% projected ownership. For the purposes of the 2-game slate, Trey McKitty, who has missed the last couple of weeks, was limited on Tuesday. Obviously, that would open up a full-time role for Zach Davidson. He's also on the injury report with a hip issue. He was limited on Tuesday. I'm right now projecting Davidson in, McKitty out. I could see, a world where McKitty does end up suiting up, but you could bank on a handful of targets for Zach Davidson. If McKitty sits, will he catch them? That is up for you to decide when you make your lineups. Man, he has had some brutal drops this year. This backfield is, if we were to just skip a backfield every week, I think Louisville would be my choice. But, James Robinson had a usable score last week, 14.5 DraftKings points for J-Rob in against a DC defense that Neil has been forcing teams to throw because their offense has just been putting up so many points, but they've been pretty inefficient as a run defense. James Robinson, not a great workload last week, only 6.8 weighted opportunities, but like I said, dramatically outperformed that workload. Still, though, we saw Louisville keep 3 running backs active in week 7. I don't know. I think on the main slate, I have a really hard time getting to a guy like James Robinson, but for the 2-gamer, he is legitimately interesting. Where are you at?
Yeah, I was last week we talked about how inefficient this defense has been against the run, that it's been like this, like on paper is such a strong spot, but like I can't really trust it because of how much pressure they get. Like, are teams really this good, or is it just limited rushing opportunities? But then we saw James Robinson do it again. So I guess at this point, after seeing Robinson do it last week in this matchup, which is a strong one, and you kind of think maybe I know that they've been passing it quite a bit, but if they, can keep it close early on, maybe they want to keep the ball on the ground to keep the DC offense off the field. So maybe they try to lean on the run more than usual. I don't know. It's certainly not a high confidence spot, but I think James Robinson is somebody that I might have some shares of on the main slate, even going in. But at the very least, he's a strong late swap option, and I'll definitely have some shares on the 2-game slate.
Yeah. 5.7 yards per carry allowed from the DC defenders over the last month. League's worst run defense by that metric over that period of time. Houston Gamblers at the St. Louis Battlehawks. This is our second game on Saturday. This game kicks off at 3 p.m. Gamblers are 7.5 point underdogs. Total here is 44.5. Neil, I don't think I have a take on the spread or total here. If I had to take something, I guess I'd take the over. What do you think?
Yeah, I got no, I think it's like the correct spread. I think like the Battlehawks are going to easily win this game, but but it's 7.5 point spread feels about right. So I got nothing here.
Yeah. Everyone listening to this show will be glad to know that I actually know who's on the Houston roster at quarterback this week. Hunter Dekkers and John Rice Plumlee. We saw them split last week in what was kind of a weird split. Rice Plumlee got, I believe it was only a series in the third quarter and actually looked really good, kind of threw a bit of a miraculous touchdown to Jalan White. And then he ended up getting subbed out again for Hunter Dekkers. Someone, as you can imagine, was asked about this after the game. And he basically just said, look, like John Rice Plumlee had been with the team for 4 days at that point. Like it didn't really matter how well he played because we just didn't feel comfortable having him out there for more than that series that we had him set up for. So right now I've got about a 75-25 split in favor of Hunter Dekkers. Neil, I can't imagine you're getting to either of these guys on the main slate, but for the 2-gamer, would you entertain either quarterback?
You are correct that I'm not playing either on the main slate. I guess probably not. Like okay. I'm tempted to be like, I mean, Plumlee look good. What if they play him a little bit more? But I can't imagine unless he's listed as a starter. If Plumlee is listed as the starter and we think there's an actual possibility that he could be like the full-time starter, then maybe because it's the second game of the 2-gamer too, so we could swap to it potentially if we need to. I'd say it's only a late swap option on the 2-gamers is the only place I will get to either of these quarterbacks, and I think I'd be more inclined to do it if it is Plumlee and he's listed as the starter. If it's Dekkers listed as a starter, I just have to imagine it's still going to be a split. So yeah, it's tough to get there.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And for what it's worth with Rice Plumlee, I mean, this guy can run. Like he looked really, really impressive as a rusher. So if we did get word that he was starting and had some confidence he was going to play at least 70% of snaps, he would be a guy that I'd be interested in, particularly on the 2-game slate, but need to keep an eye out for a midweek Sumlin quote. By the way, Sumlin was very angry when James Larson at postgame, in the postgame presser, James Larson said, "Coach, could you recap the loss?" And Sumlin goes, "You want me to recap the whole game? You want me to recap the whole loss?" And James Larson was like, yeah. And he was like, okay, well, here you go. And it's like, come on, Kevin. Like, you don't need to be this upset. All right. When it comes to these wide receivers, Neil, I noted this earlier in the show, but Jalen Moreno-Cropper, clearly the best value of the Houston pass catchers, 88% route share, 22% target share, 2 red zone targets per game over his last 2 games. All of those marks lead the team. This is a terrible matchup, Neil. But yeah, Moreno-Cropper at 4,800 projecting as a pretty strong value. I only have 12% ownership there, but I do think that'll come up by Friday. I imagine he'll probably end in the 20 to 25% range. Anything to add on Cropper and any other thoughts on these pass catchers?
Yeah, I mean, Moreno-Cropper, I'm with you. I think the ownership's going to come up from the number we have it at right now because he is the one that's like clearly playable, I'd say, for Houston. Right. Outside of Moreno-Cropper, I mean, if you want to mix in some Kirkland, I think Lawrence Keys is like borderline playable. So maybe as a late swap option, I probably don't get there going in, I guess as a bring back potentially, but I think Moreno-Cropper is actually a strong option. Other than Moreno-Cropper, I might not get to anybody on this Houston offense.
Yeah. So, I think people listening are probably wondering, well, what about Justin Hall? One of Jake's favorite players. What about Justin Hall? Justin Hall ran 32% of routes in week 7. And it was much like the Chris Rowland number, where as soon as I saw that, I was like, I need to investigate. I need to ask whoever I possibly can about this. Unfortunately, I can't get into the Houston midweek media availabilities, but I was able to reach out to someone close to the team to say, hey, what is up with this Justin Hall 32% route share in week 7? And the quote that this source gave me was, Justin Hall has dropped a few touchdowns over the last few games. I think Kevin Sumlin just hates him now. That's pretty disappointing to me. I love Justin Hall, but I do think you have to keep in mind that Sumlin is a petty guy. His press conference behavior has shown this. And yeah, Justin Hall, 32% route share, 7,100. I just don't think I can get there. Maybe if you're feeling really brave, a share or something on the 2-game slate, but yeah, just not for me. It is a real sad thing to have to do the Justin Hall obituary. 2025 target leader, by the way, led the league in targets easily, like 15 more than the next closest player, and riding the pine with Kevin Sumlin as the head coach. The pain just never ends in Houston. Neil, this backfield, also a little bit painful. I wrote it up as like, I think there's a million different ways you could kind of form an opinion or an angle on how you want to play this backfield, particularly for the 2-game slate. I wrote it up as sort of Marcus Yarns being the best option. He did have a brutal, I believe it was a second quarter fumble, but he still led the backfield in weighted opportunity, 35% of backfield weighted opportunity. He's also led the backfield in weighted opportunity in 3 of the last 4 weeks. Again, it's going to be a gross split between these 3 backs. But, at 5,400 on the 2-gamer, we've seen explosive plays from Yarns. We've seen a decent red zone workload from Yarns. He's my favorite. Do you have a take there?
Yeah, I'm looking at your weighted opportunity chart from week 7, and the 3 running backs are 5th, 6th, and 8th on the list. 10, 9.7, and 8.7, like, which is actually like pretty strong weighted opportunity for UFL. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, they're obviously, like I said, they're all top 8, so they all would be. There's 8 teams, and they're all in the top 8. It's kind of nuts to see that, and yet I'm still not really wanting to play any of them because it is such a split. I'm with you. I think Yarns is like, if I'm going to play one, it would be Marcus Yarns. Marcus Major, I think, is playable. I honestly, they're all semi-playable, but like playable in the way that I'm probably not going to go into the slate playing them. Maybe I'll get to some. Marcus Major only 4,300, I suppose, is sort of enticing.
Yeah, he's been kind of the odd man out on goal line stuff from what we've seen. Like, they've had a pretty clear preference to Jalen White, Yarn second, Major third. But it wouldn't shock me if they mix that up. They haven't been super sticky with backfield usage thus far this year. But yeah, I think, Neil, when I was writing up the Houston backfield, I literally had the thought where I was like, this article is 2,000 words in total. I think I could write 2,000 words on just the usage in this backfield, because it's, like I said, there's a million different ways you could view this and think like, oh, actually there's an in for Major. Oh, maybe I could play Jalen White because of this or that. So, whatever you think is best. But yeah, I was leaning more towards Yarns, probably White second, Major third, but million different ways you could play this. Moving on to the other side of this game, Neil, what do you think of the Spring King, Luis Perez here? Because it kind of felt like last week, the St. Louis offense, all of a sudden, looking like some of the A.J. Smith offenses that that got us a bit more excited in the old XFL days and the 2024 UFL. I was encouraged by what we saw from Perez in this offense last week.
I was too. This is one that I want to attack. I suspect I will be overweight on the Spring King. Nice. And it's kind of fun that we have a lot of ways to, split up the stacks with the Spring King. I do Hakeem Butler. We have him projected for 30% ownership. I think I'm going to be over that number. I think he's going to be somebody that I'm like taking a pretty big stand on. Hakeem Butler. Not the best matchup with Houston. I think the defense is, for a while I kind of felt like a defense to pick on, but they've been not terrible. But I think if Luis Perez can develop a connection with Hakeem Butler, that could be just atomic. I'm in. I'm going to be playing certainly over 30% Hakeem Butler. But I do think you can, mix and match with Stephen McBride, Ja'Cour Pearson. I think there's a lot of different ways to play this offense in general. I think most of my stacks with Luis Perez are going to have Hakeem Butler. Maybe all of them will. But I do think you can, kind of mix and match. I'm trying to see how deep. Maybe Blake Jackson. I doubt I necessarily. Just over 51% of the routes last week. Looks like it's kind of McBride has separated a bit from Blake Jackson, so it's probably just going to be Hakeem Butler, McBride, maybe a little bit of Pearson. That's probably it as far as stacking.
Yeah, Neil, I will say, sorry to pull this on you. That was actually we had a back end issue with Blake Jackson's route. So he was once again at like 97%.
Okay,
absolutely nothing. I thought this would be a great segment for the show. I have not checked. What if you had to guess? What do you think Blake Jackson's yards per route run is this season?
Ooh, 0.7.
0 point something. 0.7. Okay, I was gonna say 0.4. Let's see what we have here. Blake Jackson. Ooh, 0.48.
Oh man,
right.
You got me.
That is he really is the Win Sprint King. No, it's not. Really is the Win Sprint King this year. But yeah, I think Ja'Cour Pearson, Stephen McBride are the two guys that I would be mixing in as well. Neil, I added a sentence or two about this in my article. I'm curious if you are stacking up Perez. Are you on those teams? Are you going to be leaning towards It's hard to roster on main slate a Houston running back, but would you be leaning towards a Houston pass catcher with the hopes that the gamblers can actually push here? Because, if St. Louis gets out to like a 17-0 lead by the middle of the second quarter, they would be happy just grinding the game out with their backs.
Yeah, certainly. I do think that I think I'm almost tempted to say that I will play some of the Marcuses as bringbacks, just because I like this game so much, because I like this side of the game so much, and it's like, I don't know, like we talk about liking Marcus Young, but Marcus Major is only 4,300, and
that's true.
Weighted opportunity by salary is like that's actually really strong. Maybe you can make a case for it. I don't love it because of the matchup, but I might get to a little bit. But yeah, I think my guess is that more than 50% of lineups that have Luis Perez in them will also have Moreno-Cropper. Do you think that maybe that's a little bit much, but I think a lot of people who are using optimizers, sims, when you have a Luis Perez lineup, it's going to have a Moreno-Cropper bring back. I wonder if the running backs are maybe a way to get different a little bit. Not something I'll have a ton of. Ultimately, I'm certainly not going to force the bring back. It'll be something that I would like to get some bring back from. Some of my lineups have a bring back from Houston, but my guess is that I will have some St. Louis stacks that don't have anybody coming back from Houston.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think, you could mix in the Marcuses, you could mix in a Lawrence Keys or a Jontre Kirkland. For what it's worth, I should have mentioned this when we were talking Houston. Jontre Kirkland did miss Tuesday practice with a shoulder. If he ended up sitting, that would move Justin Hall back into like sort of a full-time role there. So he would be interesting, but yeah, keep an eye on that. I will have updates either on Twitter, but definitely maybe on my Twitter, but definitely on in our Discord channel, our paywall Discord, and of course in the article. Article will always be updated with any relevant injury info. Neil, speaking of injury info, Kevon Latulis off the injury report. So unfortunately, likely no two-man backfield for St. Louis. Post-game in week 7, head coach Ricky Prohl, and the usage bears this out. We sort of know this, but he said, we're comfortable with all these backs. We think we have 4 great backs. Rajee Harris, I don't think is coming back this year. But between Jarvion Howard, Kevon Latulis, and Kylan James, the team is comfortable using all 3. I would imagine, Neil, for you, you're probably mostly looking at those guys as 2-game slate plays. Maybe Jarvion Howard as a main slate option. Where are you at on the backfield?
Yeah, I don't know that I go into the slate with any, so maybe some late swap on the main slate, but most likely not playing them with all 3 of them active. Houston allowing 99 rush yards per game, so not exactly a great matchup from that standpoint. Just allowing 3.7 yards per carry. So I think I'm mostly just playing this through the passing game on St. Louis.
Yep. Yeah, I think that is very reasonable. All right, we can move it on to our final game. The Sunday Hammer. This is probably the game I'm personally the most excited to watch. It's the Columbus Aviators at the Birmingham Stallions. This kicks off at 1 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. Columbus is a 3-point dog. The total, at least on DraftKings, is a slate high, 46.5. Neil, I have a hard time with this one again. I'm curious what your opinion is on the spread or the total. I don't know that I have a take. Maybe I'd take Birmingham -3. This really does feel about right to me, though.
I'm taking the over. I think this is one where the Birmingham defense has just been kind of a weak defense. I know last week they overperformed expectations, but again, that's just I think it's just Dallas's offense is kind of broken. I think most teams are going to be able to put up points on Birmingham, and then of course you have Dorian Thompson-Robinson looking pretty good. I think I'll take the over here.
Yep, like that. Neil, I was pretty excited when I saw our first run of ownership projections. Obviously a bit preliminary since we record on Thursday. Friday ownership always a bit more accurate, but Jalan McClendon only 6.5% for a guy who has been very consistent in terms of his scores. He really hasn't broke any slates this season, but overall, he's been a pretty good fantasy quarterback, and he's got a great matchup against the league's softest pass defense by yards per attempt allowed. You already highlighted that. I did note in my article, Neil, and I'm curious what your opinion is on this, and of course, McClendon more broadly, but, Jalen Morton's played 1 to 2 snaps every game since week 2. Last week, though, he had like a Cam Newton Auburn highlight play where defenders were just falling off of him. I mean, it was a really impressive red zone designed QB rush touchdown where he ran about 15 yards. It probably broke like 4 tackles. That did make me a little concerned that maybe Jalen Morton would become a bigger part of the offense here in the final few weeks, particularly in the red zone, because he does look like a great runner. Yeah, where are you at on McClendon with this sort of Jalen Morton overhanging fears that I mentioned?
Yeah. I mean, I hate it. I hate the Jalen Morton right. Taking those, because that's a big part of like McClendon. Like I think he had in the first game of the year, I think he had a rushing touchdown. Like he has that as part of his game. Yeah. Potentially, you have the potential for a 7-8 point play with a rushing touchdown in the red zone. And that, the likelihood of that goes down, I think, with Jalen Morton looking good, and maybe the team just moves to him. Now, I do think like they're not really using Jalen Morton to throw the ball, so McClendon's still the better option for them as like he could run or pass. The defense doesn't know what's coming. So I do think, it doesn't go away completely. But yeah, I don't love that Jalen Morton is there. With that said, I mean, Jalen McClendon, if he's going to be under 10% owned, this is probably going to be my biggest stand on the slate is getting way overweight on Jalen McClendon. Again, he's a competent quarterback in the best possible matchup with this Stallions defense. As you said, just like this has been a great matchup in terms of yards per pass attempt allowed, yards per game allowed through the air. So yeah, McClendon, even though the team likes to run the ball quite a bit, I think I'll just lean on the talent and the pass funnel matchup with McClendon. If the field is not going to, it's one where like if he was super chalky, I would not want to play McClendon, but because we've got him projected for single digit ownership, that's where I'm like, okay, give me 25% McClendon, something like that. And I'll feel pretty good about that.
Yeah. Plus, Columbus underdogs in this game. So should be, they're one of those teams where if they did get a lead, they would be happy to grind it out with their backs. But Birmingham's offense has looked competent. That could push McClendon. And that would also keep Jalen Morton off the field if they were in a, sort of a must throw situation. And this is the last game of the slate. Last week, Neil, I mentioned I was pretty excited to play McClendon at low ownership. That was the first game though. So I was taking a bit of a hit in terms of late swap equity. Now, I mean, we can load up on McClendon and have a lot of flexibility with our lineups. And at least in our projections right now, we've got Tay Martin and Antoine Wells projecting as pretty solid values. I sort of wrote up Antoine Wells as like maybe the cheap guy that I was going to be targeting a bit more, but I think both are great options. And I also mentioned Keke Chism as like, look, his projections kind of terrible. He doesn't really give you anything after the catch, but he's a full-time player. Like he's out there. He could catch a touchdown, only 6K. No one's going to play him. Yeah. Anything to add on those pass catchers? Because I think they're all pretty solid options if you want to play a lot of McClendon.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like all three of them. I do think that Wells is probably he's clearly the best point per dollar option, the one that I feel the best about. But Tay Martin has been, kind of he's been the lead receiver there. He's looked like a pretty elite receiver this year. 9 targets in the last game. That's all promising. But I agree that Keke Chism going to come in at lower ownership, still running over 90% of the routes. He's a guy that can score touchdowns. So I like all 3 of these. I'll be mixing and matching probably double stacks of those 3 receivers.
Love that. This game does have a showdown slate. So if you are playing showdown, guys like Jalen Moore, Alize Mack, I think would both be sort of moderately in play. Neil, this backfield, I mean, one of these weeks I'm going to hit the nail on the head with my initial projections and get all 3 of these running backs projected for like exactly 7.1 fantasy points. I was very close this week. Yet again, another sort of 3-headed split in Columbus. John Lovett did lead the way in terms of rush attempts. He had 10. Zaquandre White had 4. Toa Taua had 1. But White ran 17% of routes, had 2 targets. Toa Taua, 46% of routes, easily leading the backfield with 3 targets. So weighted opportunity ended up being pretty equal across the board. 39% for White, 34% for Lovett, 27% for Toa Taua. Neil, I feel like we've said this several weeks in a row, but at least I'm still at the point where I just want to play the cheapest guy for the most part. I think they're all viable. But Toa Taua would be my favorite overall, particularly on the showdown slate. He's only 4,200, so pretty nice price tag there.
Yeah, I think the same thing holds. I mean, last week we kind of I was hoping for a little bit of a maybe the kind of a rotation of who gets to be the lead back. And that
Right,
didn't really
right.
work
Yeah,
out
we
with
mentioned
Tawa.
that.
Did not work out with Tawa last week, as we see here, had the lowest weighted opportunities. But I still think, I think just playing the cheapest guy makes sense. But I'm probably not playing any of them on the main slate. The only way I could imagine doing so is I do like the running backs on the other side of this game. So because I'm going to be playing running backs from the other side of this game, I guess there's potential if I need to catch up, I could swap to somebody from this side. But I hope it does not come to that.
Yeah. Man, I do really enjoy watching this backfield because all three backs are so different stylistically. That is one thing I really appreciate. Lovett had that breakaway run last week where he looked like he was like the 17th fastest player on the field during that play. Like he was looking around like he knew he was going to get caught as soon as he got to the open field. I thought that was pretty funny. Moving it on to the Birmingham side here. DTR. I mean, he's been one of the league's better fantasy quarterbacks since he took over here. And he's got, I believe right now, our highest quarterback projection at about 20 DK points, projecting as a good value, projecting as one of the highest owned quarterbacks of the slate. Neil, when I first ran ownership, I was a little worried DTR's ownership could maybe get a bit out of hand here. It didn't, though. Only 21% projected ownership. I'm curious where you're at on him in a matchup where, we all like DTR. I think we all like where this Birmingham offense is, but Columbus, very clearly, their run funnel, much worse against the run, pretty strong against the pass. What do you think of DTR?
I think DTR is a strong play. I mean, even with being a run funnel, he can also do it on the ground, which is helpful.
Right.
I think DTR is a strong option. It'll be a lot of single stacking for me. I probably won't have more than like 25%, but I do think I'll be, if he comes in 20%, I suspect I'll be a little bit over that number. Not going to be in half my lineup, so we'll have more than 20% of DTR. Love that you can stack him a lot of different ways. I think it's a pretty strong offense. I think if McFarland, I'm assuming McFarland will be active again for this one. You can include McFarland in stacks. Also ran over 50% of the routes last week. So I like DTR. I'm going to be stacking him up. I like going back to Justin Ross following the big dud last week. Mickens remains a strong option. I think he's, arguably the top receiver on the team. I think Kane is still kind of a fun contrarian play. And then Dawood Davis, 68% of routes last week. I played some Dawood Davis last week thinking that he would get more routes as they move other places to the slot, but they just moved Dawood into the slot, surprisingly.
Yeah, that was a good call.
I think he is also in play.
Yeah, absolutely. Dawood Davis, only 7 slot snaps at slot wide receiver in the first 6 weeks of the season, but then in week 7, 19 slot snaps. Definitely a notable role change for Dawood Davis. I really thought they would go with Jabri Barber sort of as that secondary slot guy behind Jaden Mickens. Ended up being Dawood Davis, and at 4,700, I do think he is a reasonable way to save some salary. And then, I just wanted to reiterate what you said on Deon Cain. No one's going to want to play Deon Cain, but we've seen it from Deon Cain, time and time again. I think I had a stat in my article, 3 of his last 11 games, he's hit the 100-yard bonus, and he'll probably only be, 4, 5, 6% owned this week. So he's a guy that I really like mixing into DTR lineups. Like that. And then when it comes to the backfield here, Neil, last week we saw Tyrion Davis-Price, Anthony McFarland as the 2 active running backs. It was pretty much an even split in terms of snaps and weighted opportunity. TDP was at 43% of snaps, 53% of weighted opportunity. McFarland at 53% of snaps, 47% of backfield weighted opportunity. You noted, though, clear edge and routes for McFarland at 54%. I'm not sure what they're going to do with Snoop Conner. I think they're just sort of playing around with different backfield combinations, trying to figure out, once we get to real crunch time, week 9, week 10, maybe the first round of the playoffs, like who would be the 2 backs that we keep. Definitely keep an eye out to see who ends up being active there. I think my favorite angle, though, when it comes to like playing this backfield on the main slate is just loading up on Anthony McFarland. And then you have a really easy swap to Snoop Conner, who's 400 cheaper. What do you think about that, Neil? And have you thought about any other ways to play this?
Yeah, I also like that. You can also, it looks like he's the same price as Justin Ross. You can always swap from Anthony McFarland to Justin Ross if you have it in the flex. So yeah, I think that is a smart approach. Just load up on Anthony McFarland, and then you can swap as necessary once we get the news of who's active.
Yeah, love that. I think that's just about everything for Showdown since things are so compressed. I'll always throw out Jordan Thomas as a Showdown option because he generally carries pretty good TD equity. They're throwing him some deep balls. The only other thing that I want to keep an eye out for is like maybe Elijah Cooks ends up being active for Birmingham. I don't think that'll change much. To me, he's 6'4", so I'd imagine he's kind of only going to be an outside guy. Like I don't think they would make him like a big slot. I don't imagine that'll change projections much, but when inactives drop, just be sure to refresh everything and see what the update has. But I can't imagine I would give him much work there. Neil, anything to add before we get out of here?
No, good luck. Hopefully we do not get a repeat of last week's Birmingham Dallas game that I loaded up on and it was just a complete dud. This week should be a fun one. We've got tons of good quarterback options this week, I think.
Yeah, no, I think this is a really fun slate. Hope everybody has a good time playing it. Hope we can fill these contests once again, Neil. But appreciate everyone for tuning in to the Week 8 edition of the Fantasy Points UFL Breakdown.